Welcome to OCD Whisperers Show, and I have really special guests here today, and I have Emily and Lindsay, and they are two sisters living with obsessive compulsive disorder. How fascinating is that, guys? So 3 years of sharing anxiety-ridden saga one after another, they have come to learn that through their obsessions and compulsions, may differ, but they can use the same mindfulness techniques and cognitive therapies to help cope with anxiety. And this led them to create Presently, which is a mindfulness jewelry brand that uses these very techniques to help ground you in the present moment. And guys, they sent me some pictures of this. It looks really cool. I love it. And I thought this would be so awesome to have them here today so we can talk a little bit about their journey and their amazing product. So hi, girls.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Could you, I think one of the things that, the audience I'm sure would love to know and hear about is kind of your own stories with OCD. So maybe let's just start there for a minute.
Sure. Want to start?
Sure. I've been diagnosed.
And this is Lindsay.
This is
speaking,
Lindsay.
by
Oh,
the
sorry.
way.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just going to say.
Lindsay, older sister, 33, and diagnosed in, what did we say? Figured
2005.
2005. She remembers dates better than I do. 2005. But my OCD has it started out when I was in middle school. But just very, I don't want to say, simplified OCD, because no, the OCD is not simple at all. But it was more of your, the common things that you hear about in OCD.
The stereotypical things.
Right. So it was a lot of, touching of light switches and making sure that, I checked something a certain amount of times or asked a question a certain amount of times and got clarity, making sure this, oven was turned off, making sure doors were locked, more about it was basically so that nothing bad would happen if I didn't do those things. And then it kind of transformed into, having OCD kind of in the background a little bit, but it wasn't as prevalent in my life until I was in high school, and it was my junior year, and it took on a totally different form where I didn't even realize that it was OCD. It's called existential OCD. And that was scary because I didn't even put the two and two together. And I also was never formally diagnosed that I had OCD, but I knew that my father had it and I knew what OCD was about. But it was more so, your what did you call it? Stereotypical OCD. I don't even know if that's the right term, but anyway, so it kind of developed into another form of obsessions and compulsions and a whole different mindset of the unknown and what's real, what's not real, and just really doubting my own gut and my own self, which was very scary. And it's hard to kind of know that you're going through something. It's hard to kind of pinpoint what that is OCD. And I didn't know that was OCD until I actually went to therapy and talked to someone about it. My mom actually did some research and told me that it was part of OCD, which is fascinating because I didn't know that there was other types of, obsession and compulsion, and that it can go this far out of the norm of thinking. And yeah, so that's kind of something that rocked my world in high school, and continually still have existential OCD on a day-to-day basis, but it's not to the level of panic that it brought to me when I was in high school, because I didn't know what it is. Now that I know that it is part of OCD, I understand how you can get there, and how you can have those thoughts and those obsessions. So just something that if I wish I would have known, because that would have literally saved me so much fear and so much, intense emotions and questioning of things that, no one should ever have to go through.
Yeah, to be honest, if I could tell you how often I hear that, right? Like if I only knew about, all the different kind of subtypes and all the different ways that it can manifest, it definitely would have saved, I think, a lot of people a lot of time and trouble. But for anybody listening, if they're not quite sure what existential OCD is, can you maybe share, just not to get super personal, but if you're okay to share just maybe a couple of things that were the common things that you noticed, like, oh yeah, this is where I get kind of sticky.
Yeah. So it was, it started when I started doubting reality and started not being sure if, how would I know if I'm alive, or how would I know if I was dead? And like thinking in that sense, it's kind of hard to like put into words of that feeling, but it's just the unknown and
like suddenly everything around you feels like fake.
Yeah. And also just like, if I were to feel a certain way, how would I know that's even the truth? It gets extreme.
Yes, because OCD is a doubting disease, right? So you literally can doubt everything, anything you can imagine, you can doubt.
So that's how it all started. And it was basically how do I know if I'm alive? Like, even if I'm having a conversation with someone, I'd get myself so freaked out that I wasn't sure and questioning that, like, my stomach was in knots for like months and months and months. But now, I still have those thoughts, and those thoughts are more like, how do I know if I didn't get hit by a car? How do I know if I
got roofied or not roofied?
Got roofied or not roofied. That's what I had the other day. And just thinking about things that your mind kind of goes into this spiral of just, very irrational way of thinking, but feels very real. And it's hard to kind of like get past that unless you have a sister who says, go on the date. This is just OCD. It's just part of it. Not giving in, not telling me that, no, you're not going to be roofied. No, you're not going to be hit by a car, but saying, I'm not answering, your OCD, and kind of living with uncertainty is all that it is about, that I've learned that's OCD. It's just living with the unknown.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And what about you?
So my OCD is a little different. And it wasn't actually diagnosed until 2016. And I guess it kind of started, I noticed I was anxious from my first memory, like as a kid. I just, had separation anxiety. I, wouldn't stay over at sleepovers, and, if it was down the street, I'd call my mom to come pick me up. And, then I got to middle school, and I would call my mom on the phone every day at lunch. And like, to this day, like, my friends are like, yeah, you were the girl like on the payphone at lunch, like crying. And that was just always what I thought it was. Like, I'm anxious for some reason. I'm, attached to my parents. And then when I got into college, it sort of shifted to, whatever I was doing in the moment. So I was going out, I was drinking, meeting new people. And so, the first example I can think of, the most basic example, I was, and a lot of this had to do with drinking, because drinking impairs your judgment, and sometimes you forget things when you're drunk. And so that, like, I think that's really what like spiraled it. And I remember just like waiting outside on a line at a bar, and I leaned my head against like the wall, like a brick wall. And I just had this thought, like, what if like somebody peed on this wall and it's like in an alley, and now I have to like pee in my hair and I have to go home and shower. And so that was like I think that was like the first time I kind of felt like that, like I so desperately wanted to go home and shower, even though the logic, like if I was standing up here, like however tall I am, it logically doesn't really make any sense. But in my head, I like, that's all I could think about. And then I'd go to my friends, my friend saw me crying, and she sort of like, what's going on? And I sort of had to tell her, and she was like, okay, do what you have to do, but like, you're totally fine. And So, that was definitely a big theme in college. Another one was sexual orientation OCD. So kind of like, when all this anxiety started, I think I was like in a psychology class in college, and something came up about, how kids, like develop curiosity or something to that nature. And I sort of like zoomed all the way back to like middle school and elementary school when I was like anxious about everything. And because in high school I was like fine, like I didn't really, I was fine. I wasn't super anxious about really anything. And that kind of almost triggered my memory about all these things that I was like, concerned about. And then I sort of remembered like, oh, I remember when I was younger, like I used to like be afraid that I would smoke cigarettes, or I'd have to confess to my mom that I'd watched an R-rated movie. It was like these little things that you sort of forget. And then once you remember them, you're kind of like everything like kind of clicks into place. And so the sexual orientation OCD kind of came back with me in college. And so, as I was with, I was dating someone at the time, and, so that's a whole nother, like, do I tell him this? Like, do I know? How do I know? How do I not know? Like, I saw this girl who was pretty, like, does that mean I'm attracted to her? I'm attracted to women and I shouldn't be with my current boyfriend? Like those kinds of thoughts. And yeah, so after college, I think it was like right after I graduated, I think the sexual orientation OCD kind of stopped me from going to therapy because I felt like it was something I couldn't even like speak out loud. But I think it just got to the point where I was like, this is like enough. Like I need to go to therapy. And Lindsay had been to therapy. And at this point, like I still didn't know I had OCD. I didn't really know what it was. I thought I was just anxious and I just needed some help. And then the first session, she diagnosed me with OCD. And I always think this is so interesting because I would never think that anything that I was going through was OCD until she started explaining it to me. And then all those things from the past sort of clicked into place. And so, like, and Lindsay, like, even though she was so well versed in OCD at the time, like, she didn't know that like me confessing to my mom or like me feeling super guilty about the silliest things was OCD.
I didn't even know that that was a part of OCD.
Right. Like, I don't think we really kind of discovered all the different types of OCD until recently. And so I think that's kind of where we started. Like, I know Lindsay has been very outspoken about her OCD and anxiety because she always wants to help people. And like, she knows that if she had known something earlier, if someone had like talked to her earlier, she could have, helped them. And so just by the fact that like we barely knew any of this stuff before we started like really digging into it.
And we had OCD ourselves.
Like, we're just thinking like there's so many people out there that probably have no idea that what they're experiencing is OCD or what they're experiencing is totally normal. Like, no one's ever really told me that like sometimes thoughts are not facts. Like, it's just like, it's just very.
And something that I'm always saying is like, I don't understand why we're not taught about mental health in our, elementary school, when you're taught about like how the body works and how all these different parts, organs, and things in your body, how they work. And, we're taught about, when you get your period and how that is. And it's like, nothing is about the mental health about it, but that's like the most important part.
At least when we were in school. I don't
know how it is now. And I still don't think it's as talked about and brought up as it should be, because I think a lot of people suffer from mental health and the fact that we're not speaking about it and it's not part of the culture, or now it's starting to become more and more prevalent in our culture. But before, it's like, people were like nervous to talk about it, embarrassed to talk about it. But it's like, that's what we're trying to break that barrier so that people can feel more comfortable, sharing their stories. Because I think once you share your story, it lets someone else share their story, and it just helps people, get out of that headspace where it's not okay to share, because it really is.
Yeah. So thank you both for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you were saying that I think everybody would relate to I mean, even in my practice or, all the people I've ever worked with, like, this is literally such a common story that you hear over and over again, right? Is like, I just didn't know, like, I didn't know that this was part of it, because what you see in the media, right? It's more like lining things up, or like something dirty that I touched, or like turning something off and on. And it's kind of, that's it. Right. And it's like, there's like, I think one of my podcasts I got into just naming, going through a little bit about each subtype. And I think there was like 19, different ones. And the reality is like, whatever is really most important to you as a person, like that's the stuff that'll stick. So really, anything can become a compulsion, and your brain can, suddenly start to kind of attach to different things. But more than anything, it's like you guys were saying, right? It's also learning about how OCD brains work a little differently than other brains, right? Just like if somebody has ADHD, their brain is processing and working a little differently than an OCD brain, right? Or, learning some of those pieces definitely can help tremendously, right? And then to realize, like, I don't have to take all this stuff personally or so seriously. Like, my body's just like, my brain's doing what it's supposed to do. It's creating a lot of thoughts and content. That's great. But like, I get to decide what I do with those.
Right.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the journey from that to this company that you guys created, which I just think it's so awesome. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I guess how it started, well, we're in COVID 2020. And, I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety, and, we both kind of moved home, and, along with like the germ anxiety and everything, it's like, well, now I can't see my friends, and I'm afraid to see my friends. And also my boyfriend started law school that year and in a different state. And so there was a lot of things that I was struggling with. And so I kind of just like wanted something personal that would kind of remind me what my therapist taught me. In those cases where like my anxiety is so extreme, where I can't really like focus and hone in on like what she taught me, because the OCD thoughts are kind of like taking space and taking over. And so I was like, how like great would that be if I could just have, like something on my wrist that sort of brought me back, and like, reminded me of like, maybe there's like one thing that my therapist taught me that sort of like got me out of my head a little bit. And that one phrase is, my thoughts are passing clouds. It took me a while to figure out which phrase I could even use, because I did some like Googling and, tried to find like, I didn't even know what to call it, like affirmations or reminders for OCD or anything. And I couldn't really come up with anything really at the time. And a lot of what I saw was, positive affirmations like, good vibes only, or think happy thoughts, or, Hakuna Matata, like all these things that I know my therapist would not be telling me in session. Like, don't worry about it. Just don't,
That's right.
don't think about it.
It's like the opposite action of all of the things.
Yeah. And so I was trying to look for this phrase that didn't exist, that I couldn't find. And so, I came downstairs to talk to Lindsay, who is also living and working at home. And I was just like, I think like I have an idea, like, wouldn't this be so cool to like help people with OCD and even anxiety too, because there are so many things like dealing with your own emotions, or dealing with, like some people sometimes have intrusive thoughts, they might not have OCD. Like there's just certain things that that people without OCD can also benefit from. Not saying to themselves, like, you can't be sad, like, don't be sad, be happy, like, be in a better headspace, a better mindset, and you'll be happier, that sort of thing. And Lindsay has always, loved to share her story. She's gotten up in front of rooms at, I think it was like a forum or like a weekend forum, where she just kind of like explained her experience, and so many people would like come up to her and be like, that's so amazing that you shared, like, and I always thought that was so cool. And I never, I'm just like a more quiet person. And so I couldn't see myself doing that. But I felt like this was a way to combine sort of both of our, ways of communicating and helping. And so, we came up with these 6 phrases. And each of them we came up with very carefully because we wanted to make sure that we sort of covered like every sort of like, not theory, but every idea that helps you kind of get through OCD. So, the first one is brave the uncomfortable. This could be like brave the uncomfortable thoughts that you're feeling, that you're thinking, or brave the uncomfortable feelings that you're feeling, or, braving the uncomfortable if you don't have OCD is like doing something that's out of your comfort zone, but might help you grow. We have embrace uncertainty, which is like a huge part of OCD.
Which I think can apply to
Right.
anyone.
Like all of these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I guess the point is like all of these things can really help anybody. And so that's what we thought was pretty cool.
And I think after realizing all the phrases that we've used and that we use that are used in cognitive behavioral therapy are just things that any person or any human should be taught. Like you get it, like, I don't know, it's like something like it's so basic and so simple, but no one else was sharing it out there. And no one else was sharing their story and sharing all these, helpful things that have gotten them to the place where they are today. And it's because of therapy that really helps us learn, all these different tools. And that's great. That's great. But not everyone has the ability to go to therapy, or not everyone is comfortable going to therapy. So we wanted to make it so that everyone can access, something like even if it's not a bracelet, it's just, reading our Instagram or, watching, podcasts that we do, just to understand that like there's other ways to get help, and there's other ways to like, figure out what's going on in your mind, and just kind of being that support for, anyone that really needs it.
Yeah. And what I love really is that, out of COVID, having something like this, I mean, I think like to your point, right? I think the more we can keep plugging in different products and bringing these ideas to life to help the OCD community all together, right? I think that's all wonderful and beneficial, right? Because a lot of times people don't even know that there is an OCD community, like International OCD Foundation, right? Like they're massive and they have so many different pieces of information on there, right? There's providers who outside of their practice create like self-directed courses or ebooks, or there's like ERP-based coloring book, like, right? Like now, like this product, which has, these bracelets with these reminders and prompts, where, if when folks start to plug in a little bit more into the community, they realize like, oh yeah, and when you start to hear these things about like acceptance commitment therapy, right? Like exposure response prevention, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based approaches, like a lot of acronyms. I will say this field has so many acronyms, but and when you get to learn these different pieces, and the more you start to go to different accounts, and if you're just starting off there, or, you decide to pick up a book, and read it, you'll start to hear this terminology and you'll start to recognize like it really starts to be kind of everywhere, and you can surround yourself with it. But to your point also, that even if you don't have OCD, but you're dealing with anxiety still, like a lot of these are so relevant, right? But I love that you specifically actually went out and to make sure that you actually create some of these phrases for OCD, because I cannot tell you how awesome it is to, have something like this, right? That's just such a great reminder that you can literally have right on you, and you can pick and choose from your 6 different phrases or all of them if you want. Of course, as I always tell people, non-compulsively, my friends. But, like, it's just great. It's a great thing to just have different tools and strategies, right? To help to continue to anchor and ground you, like with acceptance commitment therapy, as they say, in your values and things that actually matter to you, right? And in a life you actually want to live, not in this OCD story, right?
Right. And it's always hard. It's, what I've found is, you commit to all these things during your session, during, when you have therapy, but like sometimes when you're in the thick of like a really intense thought, like it is really hard to pull yourself out, and it's really hard to be reminded if you don't have a sister living with you, but, or if you don't have family, or if no one else knows about it, it's like just being that extra support of like having a reminder, something that kind of just, reminds you of the things that you've learned or the things that you haven't learned, and, should
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's a support system. And then even if and when, you don't, it's that, self accountability, right? Like, how can I continue to be accountable to myself for my own well-being?
Right.
Like, right, what kind of things do I need to have around me or for myself so that I can set myself up for success, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's reminders or prompts or notes or, there's a bazillion apps, you can record
Yeah.
stuff, you can put in calendars. I mean, using all the different tools you have to support yourself. Exactly right. Because yeah, you're right. When you're really kind of smack hit with it, like everything kind of halts because your whole system, as I always say, gets really hijacked, and suddenly, you're like temporarily, you just don't know, like, wait, is this a threat? Is it not a threat? Do I do something? Do I not? Wait, what's going on? Right. So you gotta get stuck. Yeah, I love that you guys created this product. Really do. So how can people find you if they want to find you and buy these awesome bracelets?
Yeah, so we are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media networks as at Think Presently. Our website is thinkpresently.com. Yeah, and you can follow us. We try to post, a couple times a week. We post pictures of the bracelets, but we also post, fun tidbits of information that might just help you get through your day.
Awesome. And can I ask, because I'm sure people might be wondering, how much are the bracelets?
Yes. So they range from 45 to 56. $5 of every bracelet does get donated to your choice of 4 charities. So we do International OCD Foundation, Child Mind Institute, ADAA, which is Anxiety and Depression Association of America, and National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Awesome.
The New York branch. So,
Chapter, yeah.
when you go to checkout, there's a little box that says, which one would you like to donate to? So yeah, we just wanted to, have a tool that was, still nice quality because you are wearing it every day, but also is affordable so that as many people as possible can.
And we also created mirror clings as well.
Oh yeah, let's forget about those. We have little $5 stickers with the phrases on them as
So you
well.
can stick it to
I
your
love
mirror
it.
Yeah.
or window, and it can be reusable. So
I love it. Those are awesome. Of course, I'll include all of that in my show notes, but thank you so much for coming on and talking about this.
thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for
much.
having us. Appreciate it.